The leader of Hezbollah has given his first public response to 2 days of attacks in Lebanon, which used sabotage communication devices, pagers and walkie-talkies, which exploded. Hassan Nasrallah accused Israel of being behind those attacks, describing it as a massacre. 12 people were killed and nearly 3,000 injured on Tuesday and yesterday. 25 people were killed and 600 people injured in the blasts. The leader of Hezbollah said it was an unprecedented blow for the group, but insisted that its ability to command and communicate remained intact. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said he believes a ceasefire in Gaza is still possible, but that the relationship between northern Israel and southern Lebanon needs to be resolved. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
We continue to work to get a ceasefire for Gaza over the finish line. And as we discussed with some of you just a day ago in Egypt, we believe that remains both possible and necessary. But meanwhile, we don't want to see any escalatory actions by any party that make that even more difficult. There is a real problem that needs to be resolved when it comes to northern Israel and southern Lebanon, and that is the fact that since October 8th, Hezbollah has been firing rockets into Israel. Israel's been firing back. The population in both northern Israel and southern Lebanon has had to flee their homes, and we all want to see them be able to go back to their homes, and that requires a secure environment. France and the United States believe strongly and are working together toward a diplomatic resolution and an agreement that would create the conditions for security that would allow people to return to their homes.
Well, for more on the bigger take around the developments in the Middle East, our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, joined me in the studio.
Week on week, we are seeing an escalation. While everyone gives the impression they want to avoid a wider war, they come ever closer to this brink. They pull back, but then go to the brink again. And in a region where often it is an accidental tumbling into war that happens rather than something which is planned and executed on time, this really, really raises the danger level. But the possibility of an Israeli incursion into Lebanon has been on the agenda or talked about almost since October the 7th. There were reports in Israeli media that some senior Israeli military officers had thought, well, this is the time. Now that we are, at war with Hamas in Gaza, let's now deal with Hezbollah once and for all. Let's deal with all of the threats facing us. And they were told to pull back. But that possibility has always been there, and it was moved ever closer with the announcement this week by Prime Minister Netanyahu that bringing the 60,000 Israelis who had to be evacuated from that border region, that volatile region where, as we heard from Orla, where Hezbollah continues to fire rockets, they want to go home, and allowing them to return to their homes is now, Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying, is part of the war aims. And even the Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, who's been very critical of the continuing Gaza war, essentially saying we've accomplished our military objectives, we should concentrate on bringing Israeli hostages home, find a ceasefire. He too has been saying that the priority now has to move to the north in order to make Israel safe. And of course, it has to be said that the residents in southern Lebanon also are feeling, they also have had to pull back from the region. So you have on both sides tens of thousands of people very, very much caught up in this escalating tension.
We'll come to Gaza in a second, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about Hezbollah. We obviously heard from Orla since his statement there. In that statement, he said that Hezbollah's capacity hasn't necessarily been diminished. Is that a realistic statement?
I think people will see that as trying to put a brave face on what has been a huge setback for Hezbollah in so many ways. And you've been reporting this here on BBC News now for the past few days. First of all, the communication struggle. They went to what is very much a very old system, the pagers that people thought were, confined to museums and our back cupboards now. Nobody really uses this one-way messaging system. But Hezbollah, knowing that the cell phones were compromised, had used this old-fashioned technology, believing they were safe. And this it has to be described as a mass casualty attack, took everyone by surprise. And the images were so startling and bloody and affected, yes, Hezbollah operatives, but they also, as we've been reporting, affected children, people in the markets, wherever they went off. It was a shock. So their communication system seems to have taken a real hit. Their confidence took a real hit, and the chaos, that sense of vulnerability, which is not a good look for an organization which lives by its defiance, and they have to be seen to be mobilized and to be seen as a formidable, they want to establish deterrence. And then came the second day, where then it was the walkie-talkies which had been compromised. So they have definitely taken a hit. Hezbollah, their main backer Iran, will have to find new systems now in order to have a kind of a system that allows them to communicate at all levels of the organization. So yes, today Hassan Nasrallah said we are still able to operate, and they're still operating militarily. They still fired rockets into Israel today. 2 Israeli soldiers were killed. Both sides have to keep indicating that they are able and willing to take on their opponent. How far they're both going to go? We say all the time, Regini, that no side wants a wider war. No side wants this to escalate further. And that is true. But they're constantly gambling with this roulette. And it's a very, very dangerous roulette. The most dangerous we've seen in decades.